Welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I have the one and only Mike Papantonio. Who is Mike Papantonio? Radio show host of the show, The Ring of Fire show, America's Lawyer. Yes, this man is America's lawyer. You know what's happening in the country right now with the opioid crisis. You know what is going on. We need to have real people fighting that. Mike Papantonio, welcome aboard. How are you doing today?
Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it. This is a critically important topic. I can tell you that right now. It's one we're not talking enough about.
Yeah, and you know, the thing about it is, I call what's going on right now legal pushing of drugs. I'm starting the show this way because I want you to give us an expression of what the difference is between the drug dealer Pablo Escobar and all these other folks and what the pharmaceuticals are doing.
Yeah, there's no difference. The only difference is that the CEOs of these major corporations are dressed up in Armani suits. They drive Bentleys and they have MBAs from Harvard and Yale and Princeton, and they have built the largest drug cartel that America has ever seen. And Pablo Escobar is a trifle compared to what these folks have done. And the difference is if you take a young man on the street corner and he's selling 5 ounces of marijuana and he gets caught 3 times, he may go to prison for life, okay? These are people that created the largest drug addiction epidemic ever in the history of America. And not one of them have been prosecuted. Not one. Now, we're seeing some indictments take place. As a matter of fact, one of the companies that I'm working against in McKesson, you've got some folks that are being indicted there. But here's what happened. This is the ugly part of the story. First of all, let me tell you, I'm not very tribal in my politics. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm just a progressive.
Right.
And so what I try to do is I try to call shots like I see them. I try to call balls and strikes. If I were to lay the blame of, who's responsible for all this, where did it really turn on us? It's 2 places. One is the attorney generals in this country had the opportunity 10 years ago to get this under control. But what they did is they met in a big room. They said, hey, can't we just fine you? Can't you just pay us fines? And then we walk out and get in front of a camera tomorrow and say we've stopped the opioid crisis. That's what they did. They accepted $19 million from these companies that have made $19 million while you and I have been talking.
Imagine.
Okay? And so they accept $19 million and then they declare victory. And all these attorney generals, the AG stands for almost governor, they use this as a political tool to get elected. Then there's another part to it, Umberto. It's even worse than that. We expect our attorney generals, the Attorney General of the United States certainly to do something. If you look at the history of both Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch and the way they turned their head, and they said, listen, we're going to fine you $1 billion or $150 million here and there. We're going to fine you, and then nobody goes to jail. We're going to make it sound like you've paid this incredible amount of money, and then nobody goes to jail. And the truth is, we don't change culture. We don't change the mind of these folks that created this epidemic in America until somebody does a perp walk. Not just somebody low on the list, but the people who made the decisions to put a glut of pills in this country that was so big, it was such a big mountain, that they understood that those pills were going to be diverted to illegal use all over the country. They knew exactly, it's part of their business plan. It is literally part of their business plan. Put enough pills out there. Yeah, we know about the addiction problem, but we're going to make a lot of money if we put enough pills out there. And that's what this case is about. And even the frustrating thing is corporate media doesn't understand that. Because why? McKesson's a big advertiser. Cardinal's a big advertiser. Purdue is a big advertiser. All these folks, huge advertisers. So how do you ever get to the point to where you change culture without saying, it's no more of you just paying money. Somebody has to be treated like that kid on the corner who might go to prison for life
You
for
know,
selling 5 ounces of marijuana.
the name of this show is Politics Done Right, and you did something very important on this show a few minutes ago when you stated it's about culture, and when you stated that you're not tribal. I'm not tribal either. I think it is essential that Americans realize that this particular issue is not a Democratic or a Republican issue. This is an issue. It's a corporate issue. It's a corporate issue where all establishments are abiding by the tenets of the corporate state or the corporate structure. I want you to speak a little bit about that, because many times on our show, when we hit corporations, people think we're being anti-American. When we hit corporations on these issues, that somehow what we're doing is hitting the basic tenet of this country. Why don't you express it in those terms that we actually have a more intense problem?
Okay, here it is. Capitalism, I got to tell you, I believe is probably one of the best monetary systems in the world. I mean, if you compare it to anything across the world, it works only if regulations are in place to make sure that greed doesn't ruin the process. We abandoned that years ago. For example, if you look at what the FDA did in this case, look at what the DEA did in this case. Sometimes you have corporations that are able to capture the regulators, whether it's the EPA that allows a corporation to dump a gazillion gallons of toxins into your river, and then taxpayers have to pay for that, whether it's the FDA that allows dangerous pills that they know clearly are going to kill people. They let them remain on the market anyway. Why does that happen? It happens because corporations have captured the regulatory process. They go to Joe or Mary, who's working with the FDA, and say, you know, Mary, I know you're doing an investigation, but gee, you're only making $100,000 a year. Come with us when this is all over. Of course, we don't want it to interfere with your investigation, but when it's all over, we're going to pay you $800,000 a year to come with us and work in regulatory. So here's the problem. How do you not go after corporations who kill people knowing that they're killing people? The opioid industry knew that 150 people were dying every day, and they knew that. They knew it for at least 7 years. The numbers kept growing. They even had something called a death map, Umberto, where they could follow the increases of death all over the country.
Walmart,
but the money was so huge. Say again?
Walmart.
Well, yeah. Well, it wasn't just Walmart. You know, you had so many of these companies that could follow that today in West Virginia, this is the percentage of people who are dying from overdoses. That kept raising every year. They kept up with that. Actually, the CDC gave them that information, and they still chose to continue killing 150 people a day because the money was too good. And what did media do about it? How about nothing? Why didn't they? Because McKesson advertises, Cardinal advertises on TV. You've got these huge companies that spend billions of dollars advertising with corporate media. I've been in a situation where I've literally been on the air getting ready to talk about a story where a pharmaceutical has killed 2,000-3,000 people throughout the country. I'm in the small count. I'm in 10, 9, 8, you know, and in the middle of the count they said, we can't do that story. Well, the reason they say they can't do the story because...
Let me make sure that I'm understanding you correctly. You're telling me that you've been in the studio, ready to do a story on drugs, and because these are advertisers on the station that you're on, that you were unable...
They killed the story.
They killed the story.
How about MSNBC? It happened more, as you may or may not know. I did
Yes.
commentary with Ed Schultz on MSNBC for a lot of years. There would be times when you had a story that was so important. How about a birth control pill that's killing women? Something called Yaz. The company knew it was killing women. They knew why it was killing women. The clinicals showed it would kill women, and they chose to sell it anyway. I'm in account, getting ready to go on the air, want to do the story. The producer pulls the story because Bayer Corporation is advertising with MSNBC and spending $2, $3, $4 million a year.
This.
So here's the point. You're programming. your programming, social media programming, sometimes is the only place on earth that you're going to get these stories, because corporate media is owned and operated by corporate America. And it's different now. There was a time, Roberto, when you had as many as 55, 60 entities that owned the media. Now it's 4. Some people argue that it's 3.
Right.
We've consolidated to the point to where you can't even get a story like the opioid crisis or the inner workings of what happened in the opioid crisis on corporate media. They can't tell the story because their advertisers won't let them. I had to go to do Russian television. America's Lawyer appears on Russian television
RT.
just so I could tell these stories. RT
Right.
America.
Right.
Can you imagine? I have to go to Russian television to tell the kind of stories that corporate media can't tell because their advertisers demand, they order them, don't tell this story or you're going to lose your advertising with us.
I want to let you know that this particular program, Politics Done Right, is not only on the internet, it's also on Pacifica Networks, KPFT 90.1 FM in Houston. So you'll be heard on our 100,000 watt station as well here in Houston, and of course throughout the country for those who are syndicating it. So this is important, and this is I'm happy that you made the necessary plug for independent media that doesn't depend on advertising from the big guys, because a lot of folks don't see that importance, and your statement does it quite well. 2 things before I want to talk about. There is a town in this country, I didn't ask you beforehand, I don't know if you remember, there's a town in this country that they have more prescriptions in that town than people in that town. Tell us a little bit about that.
West Virginia, right in West Virginia, we're representing most of the counties and the cities in West Virginia. You have a city there, you have a city there of 400 people where they pumped in 6 million pills into an area. It's not just one. Let's tell you, there's a dozen of those kinds of cities just in West Virginia. I'm getting ready to go to trial, for example, in Nevada. Okay? Mm-hmm. I'm going to go to trial. We represent the Attorney General along with the local lawyers there. Robert Eglett is a superb lawyer. That we're going to be trying that case in Nevada. There are counties in Nevada that had 1,000 people live in the county, that the companies were putting 5, 6, 7 million pills into those counties every single year. Every year. Now, why did they, first of all, they did that because it creates a glut. And what happens with the glut is the company, once the glut is created, they've sold the product. They don't really care what happens with that glut after that.
Right.
They were put on notice that the overdose levels were over the top. They knew that they were being sold in pill mills. Let me tell you how crazy it is. Some of these companies had sales forces right in these little cities and counties. They could drive by and see the pill mill at 7 o'clock in the morning with lines circled around, people standing in their pajamas just to handle their addiction. And the sales rep could actually observe that firsthand.
And many times it's the taxpayers paying for that. Is that correct?
Well, yes, that's called, great question. That is a great question. It's called externalizing losses, and here's how it works. Let me give you the equivalent. I just finished a case up in the Ohio River Valley where DuPont had pumped millions and millions of gallons of a toxin into the Ohio River and the waterways that ended up in people's drinking water all up and down the Ohio River. Mm-hmm. Caused cancer. It caused birth defects. It caused neurological disease. It's called C8. You get it in your Teflon frying pan, okay? Now, when you looked at the documents that DuPont created, it was very evident that what they were thinking is, look, we can dump it cheaply and taxpayers are going to have to clean it up. We can pass on that savings that the taxpayers are having to pay onto our stockholders. They contemplated that. You can see it all the time with all of these companies. This is the equivalent of that. Think of this opioid garbage that these companies have put into the commerce all over America. Think of that opioid garbage, and now you know who they want to clean it up. They want taxpayers. You got to deal with the addicts in your backyard. You have to pay for the rehab. You have to figure out how you're going to pay to increase the number of treatment centers. Taxpayers, you're going to have to pay for increasing the police forces. You're going to have to pay. Do you realize there are places in this country where they had rolling morgues? They had morgues on wheels because the facility morgue could not handle the overdose, the overload of overdoses in their own city, so they put morgues on wheels. That's how bad it is. And you know who paid for that? Taxpayers, not the companies.
Same
you did.
thing with oil companies, the externalities that we all pay for. Again, the cheap gas supposedly increased prices. We pay for the cancers. We pay for all these different things that are out there. Now, before we go on to your book, I know you have a new book, and I want to talk a little bit about that because I'm going to say, why did you need to make? Let's do it first. Your book, Law and Addiction. You just wrote that book, right? Is that correct?
No. Yes. Law and Addiction was just released. It's the third in a series of thrillers. Each one of them centers around real life cases. I mean, there's not one of my first one was Law and Disorder. Mm-hmm. It was about the C8 case that I just described. It was about that book involved the HIV epidemic that was caused by hemophiliac medicine. The company understood they were killing hemophiliacs all over the world. The second book involves the gun industry. This book involves the opioid industry.
But you know, I saw that. I noticed that you had. That they said, "Oh, we had fictional characters," and in my mind, it's like, Mike, Pop doesn't need fictional characters on this one. I mean, he has real characters, man.
Well, they are real characters. I really literally just changed the name.
Okay,
as you might know, I kind of got spanked on opioids for speaking out publicly about my attitude about this whole process, and so sometimes the judicial system. Here's a part of the problem. Let me tell you why I write these books. First of all, they sell very well because they're good stories. Right. They're, anytime you write a thriller, the first point is it interesting? Does it keep me engaged? These books do that. But there's another reason, and it has to do with this. In the legal system, we've created something that is a disaster, total disaster for consumers. Here it is. When we have a company that has done really, really bad things, and we start taking discovery, we take the depositions, we get interrogatories back, we find the documents. We're not allowed to give you that information in most jurisdictions. It's called gag orders. They don't want to call them, some judges don't want to call them gag orders, but that's what they are. No, we're not going to let you see how bad these companies are. Now, while they're doing that, people are still dying from the same product, okay? In pharmaceutical case after pharmaceutical case, you would have cases where the judge would say, no, we're not going to make these documents public. While that was happening, people were still taking the pills and still dying. In the environmental case that we just finished, the judge was brilliant in the way he handled it. He says, why should I keep this a secret? Why should I keep this information secret when people all up and down the Ohio River Valley are dying from cancer? That's the type of system we should have. But in opioids, this has been kept secret for a very long time. Some of these documents were sealed. After the company agreed to pay fines, they were sealed and never saw the light of day. What kind of impact did that have on us? It had 10 more years of abuse.
Mm-hmm. That is sad. Tell us a little bit about that story in the third book.
Okay, so yeah, the book is about it's actually based on how a lot of this happened. We handled the tobacco case years ago, and we did it wrong. We had some success. The attorney generals, we got them involved in making claims, in saying, look, tobacco industry, our taxpayers have had to pay all this money into Medicaid, and because of that, we need to be paid back. We thought it was a great idea, but it really wasn't. It wasn't because the money really never made its way to the counties and the cities that experienced the biggest problem, okay? This book, Law and Addiction, talks about how this case opioid case came about. It started with a lawyer in West Virginia, a brilliant young man, brilliant, tenacious character who said, look, I've had losses, I've lost people, I'm going to do something about this. And he worked it for several years, but he did something different. He said, I want to bring it on behalf of the county that lost the money. I want to bring it on behalf of the city that lost the money. I don't really care about attorney generals because attorney generals are going to cave in every time. They're trying to cave in right now. The attorney generals in the opioid case, again, are trying to cave in. And so this book tells the story of how this case came about. This lawyer came to me, and he went to another couple of law firms, and we put together a consortium, and we launched the opioid litigation. And that's how everything started. This book tells the story, and it's a captivating story. That's all I can tell you.
It has a whole lot of twists. We don't want to get into it because we want people to go ahead and buy the book, but suffice it to say,
read it.
Suffice it to say, I haven't read it yet, but based on the tail end that the agent sent, it is one to be read. Now, with the judges that are being appointed, 25% thus far by Donald Trump in the federal system, are you concerned that the hard work that you're doing, the legal work, given that the political work and the law writing work that these guys are doing is insufficient for the opioid epidemic, are you concerned with the type of corporate-centric judges that are being appointed by Donald Trump at a very young age?
Let me turn something on its head right now.
Yes.
I'm going to come totally from left field, and you're going to say that can't be. All right.
Okay.
If I were to compare the judges that Obama had appointed, I'm talking at the federal level, the appellate judges, the trial judges, they all came from corporate America. You understand?
Yes.
He appointed very few judges that did not come from corporate America. Now take that, and they're terrible. I mean, They literally, some of them are, may as well have been appointed by Donald Trump. Now take Donald Trump. Donald Trump's appointment are not that they're just from corporate America, but they're the less sophisticated judges from corporate America. They are the political entities. Many of them, they can't be described as anything but political hacks, truthfully. And so what we want to think that Obama made all these great appointments and now it's worse with Trump. You can't tell a difference, is what I'm trying to tell you. If you come up as a corporate lawyer, Humberto, all you do is you represent corporations. And then an administration says, well, you're really good on social issues. You were good on gender. You were good on, rights issues, racial issues. You were good on those issues. So I'm going to appoint you. Well, they appoint, in the Obama administration, they appointed these kind of social right kind of judges, but when you took a look at their pedigree where it came to consumers, they are terrible. Most of them are awful because they came up through the system. Now, Trump is no better. Trump's, it's even worse because at least some of these guys had some level of sophistication, in the way that they would analyze the law. Now you've got a whole setting where you've got, most of Trump administrations, these appointments are political hacks. Some of them have never even practiced law. And so it just continues to spin out of control. But it can't be said that we're in trouble now only because of these appointments. We've been in trouble for a long time. The startling news is that some of the best appointments, I don't know, this turns it all on its head, but some of the best appointments, oddly enough, were by Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon. Those were some of the best appointments. And think about that. Let me stay with me just a second.
Yeah.
Think about Ronald Reagan's relationship with corporate America. Ronald Reagan, and again, I'm just calling balls and strikes. I'm not a Republican. I'm sure not a Republican, and I'm sure not a Democrat. But Ronald Reagan, during the first burn down, you remember the S&L crisis when people lost millions? You know how he put 800 bankers in prison. Do you know how many bankers were put in prison during the 2007 burn down?
Zero. Yes.
Zero. Yeah. And they stole trillions of dollars from the American people. Okay? Do you remember the promises that we were told? Obama ran on, well, we're going to get Wall Street under control, and I'm going to appoint an attorney general that's going to do that, none of them went to jail. To this day, none of them have gone to jail.
It's funny because I talk about the establishment being both Republican and Democratic because of exactly what you said there. And in the issue with Ronald Reagan, it doesn't surprise me. The Republican Party of Ronald Reagan is very different than the Republican Party today.
Yes.
The Democratic Party of Carter is a lot different than the Democratic Party of today. In fact, a lot of the problems Carter had is because he wasn't the corporatist that many of those today are.
That's right. Carter, by the way, made some very, very good appointments. Thanks for bringing that up. He made some very good appointments that are compassionate judges. They didn't come from Wall Street, Washington lobbyist law firms. They were consumer judges that cared about people.
Right.
He was the exception to the rule.
We have some severe corporate issues, and the job that you're doing out there fighting corporations where they need to be fought, I think is important. It is worrisome because, we have the triad. We have the judiciary, the executive, and the legislative. And it seems like all three, barring progressives not being in control under the thumbs of the corporate state. So in closing, why don't you give me a little bit on that camino, on that line?
Yeah, okay. So first of all, I would add another scary point to it. The other scary point after that triad is the media. The media is wholly owned and operated by corporate America. But we bought into globalization under Clinton. Okay, remember Clinton's idea was we got to get the money out of Wall Street because it's been going to the Republicans. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to have a centrist government. Wall Street demanded that if we're going to give you big money, we want globalization. We want to send jobs out of the country if we need to make more money. We need to have laws that don't bind us in various parts of the country, of the world. So this globalization actually moved the Democratic Party to what I call the Wall Street Democrats. Right. Wall Street Democrats, for example, Joe Biden is absolutely a Wall Street Democrat. He comes from all of that. The division that's created is you have progressives that do remember. They do remember that there was a time when Democrats stood for something besides big donations, the Wall Street connections. They stood for something that was different. And then all of a sudden they start saying, well, TPP is a good idea. NAFTA is a good idea. CAFTA is a good idea. Look what it's done to this country. Look what it's doing to Europe right now, when the UK is the only country over there that has enough damn sense to get away from the EU with Brexit. Globalization is what this notion of globalization all began with Bill Clinton. And since that globalization effort started, the party has become more and more Wall Street central. And I don't know if you're going to be able to change it. Frankly, I saw what happened to Bernie the last election, where the Democrats just absolutely made him disappear because the elitist, controlled Wall Street Democrats wanted Hillary. And we could have told you it was a disaster from the beginning. Mm-hmm. But it's hard for them to learn this lesson. Why? Because of tribalism. I just can't say it enough. You've got to abandon the tribal way that you think about politics and analyze the person, analyze the policy, and analyze it in terms of is this better long range for American consumers, for our environment, for the longevity of capitalism? Is this better for us?
That is the closer, folks. Don't forget, go look for that book. Law and Addiction is the name, by Mike Papantonio. I think where can they get it?
Oh, they can get it anywhere online. Most bookstores carry it too.
And that is Law and Addiction. Senor Mike Papantonio, also known as Pop, thank you so kindly for being with Politics Done Right. This is an important concept and you're doing important work. Let's get the job done.
Thank you.